bring Lady Deborah, who's going to give a word this morning at the Lord's Academy, which I know will be great. So with no further ado, we're going to bring Lady Deborah to the platform. Amen.
I'm trying to tell her to stay right there. She just walked on out. Stay right there.
He didn't come out God.
I like it when he does that, but y'all so funny. Y'all so funny. Y'all see the same thing every Sunday, and then y'all like, what? What? How y'all doing? Okay, so my mother-in-law says, okay, First Lady, have you been to the altar yet? I said, well, I'm going this morning. It's so good to be back. Amen. It's just good to see you all, and I want to say thank you for praying for me. You were praying for me, weren't you? Amen. And so I thank God for your prayers, and I thank God that I was able to go and come back, made it back safely, and found my husband and family. As far as I know, they're safe. And so it's just good to be back. Amen. We're in the study of the United Kingdom stage, and Pastor Glenn has that already up. And so I'm going to ask you to go ahead and go to 1 Samuel. We were having a lively discussion, and I'm going to go back to that, and just to kind of refresh your memory as we were ending, was last Sunday just Mother's Day? Wow, how does the time it does seem like a long time ago. So we're talking about Saul. So we know that these few chapters are talking about the relationship that Saul had with Samuel, and talking about Saul establishing his kingdom. So somebody tell me how Saul got to be the king. How did Saul get to be the king? Go ahead. Okay. And he anointed him. Why did he choose Saul?
Because of his features?
Well, no, that's cute, but no, that's not. He chose him because that's who God told him to. Yeah, that's what I want you to say, because that's who God told him to. And so Robert has said because he was appointed, and he was appointed by God. So Samuel didn't just go down and choose just anybody. But now Samuel was concerned that, he looked good because that's what the people wanted. And so, that comes into play when Samuel goes down to anoint David, doesn't it? Well, because he had all of the sons to pass before him, and David wasn't there. David was out in the fields, and he says, well, he because they had all of the physique, they had all of the, they just looked like they should have been a king, and God had to tell him, God doesn't look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And I'm mighty afraid many times that is what we have fallen victim to, that we look at the outward appearance of a person to try to detect what they're capable of, or to try to determine what it is that they can do and what they cannot do, when that doesn't have a whole lot to do with anything that's pleasing to the eyes. Surely we all want something nice to look at. We call that eye candy, and so we all want something pleasing to the eyes, but that's not necessarily always what you need. Amen. Not always what you need, whatever that looks good. And so we're in the United Kingdom stage, and we're getting ready to talk about Samuel, or Saul's oldest son, who was Jonathan. Now, as we were ending last Sunday, we talked about unbelief and impatience, and the question was, in our little discussion segment, was if we believe that it was a sign of spiritual immaturity. And then we talked about the challenges of waiting on God's timing and the benefits of waiting on God's timing. You all said that there was a plethora of benefits to waiting on God's timing. One of very significance is when you wait on God's timing, you know it's going to be right. You know it's going to be the right thing. And you know it's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen. One of the challenges, I believe it was Mary Hunter Davis who said that anxiety has a way of creeping in. When you're waiting on something that God has promised you, you want to step out because you start getting anxious when you don't see it coming to fruition, when you don't see it manifesting itself. You have a way of wanting to go ahead and step on out prematurely to get it done. You want to put your hand in it. You want to stir around in it, and you want to make it happen. How many of you have ever done that before? You want to make it happen. You want to make it happen. And a lot of times when you get ready to go make it happen, just one thing, one mishap after another, one thing after another, and you can't figure out what it is. Well, you stepped outside of God's timing. God has a time. God has a time, and when it's His time, it is the right time. So it's a sign of spiritual immaturity. Waiting on God, it's going to take something for you to develop patience. It's going to take something for you to begin to walk by faith, because the opposite of faith then is unbelief. So you have to stay in the Word, first of all, so that you'll know faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God, that your faith is built through the Word of God, through your testing. Go through your testing. Go through your trials and go through your tribulations, my brothers and my sisters. And see, won't God just walk with you through them? That helps to build your patience, and that helps to build your faith. And so Saul was a man who was just, he was just impatient. He wanted things to work out just the way he wanted them. He wanted them to work out quickly. He wanted them to work out the way he wanted them to work out. And all the time, that's not what was planned out for him. So because of his impatience, we're going to find out that he's going to end up losing his kingdom. He's going to end up losing his kingdom. So we're in chapter 14. And as we go on, Saul, when we look at what happened, the reason he was so impatient, he didn't want to go into battle without first offering a sacrifice to the Lord. So, he stepped outside of his office as king and stepped into the priest's office. Well, that wasn't his office to step into. And so he should have just waited. And so he offered the sacrifice, and just at the time that he offered the sacrifice, Samuel came, just at the appointed time, just like he said he would. And Samuel said to him in verse 13, I'm in chapter 13, verse 13, and Samuel said to Saul, thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought him a man after his own heart. And who is that man after God's own heart? That's David. That is David. The Lord has sought a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou have not kept that which the Lord commandeth thee. And so his impatience cost him dearly. Well, I want to ask you, what do you think about this statement? People who are good at making excuses, don't be trying to think about nobody else, just listen to it. People who are good at making excuses are rarely good at anything else. And those who are quick to blame others shouldn't complain if others blame them. And then what do you think about this? It is easy to minimize our faults and emphasize the faults of others. Can you see yourself in that? I can see myself in that. My family says that I do that all the time. And so it's easy though to see everybody else's faults, to see what's wrong with everyone else without taking a look at yourself. Because when you put the spotlight on someone else, you don't have to put the spotlight on you. You don't have to think about you. And we all want to think like we're pretty near perfect. We do. We want to think we're pretty near perfect. We want to think that, we're just good old people. And we always want to say, well, I don't do that. I don't do that. But, and then about the making excuses. Some people, just think in your mind, do you know some people like that who make excuses all the time? Well, what is an excuse when it boils down to it? It's a lie, and it's just an excuse. It's just an excuse. It's something that you didn't have to say, but you did. You don't get anything done. It's the bottom line. It's an excuse. It hinders progress. It hinders progress. And so Saul, well, and it all goes all the way back to who? Adam and Eve. To Adam and Eve. It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. When he made an excuse and then she made an excuse. So it's all from sin, isn't it? It's just an excuse. You blaming everybody else. You're blaming people for, your problems, your issues. Well, you're blaming people for the reason why you haven't gotten any further than you've gotten, the reason why you can't do what you're doing. You blame everybody else instead of taking on your own responsibility. And but that's a hard thing to do. It's hard to look at yourself. It really is. It's just hard to look at yourself. And it is easy to minimize our faults and emphasize the faults of others. But that's what Saul was good at. Throughout his career, Saul was good at minimizing his own sins and emphasizing the faults of others. But it isn't the way a man of God leads God's people. Especially as a leader, you got to take the punches. I'm telling you, Saul reminds me of 45 so much. He does, because he's blaming everybody else for why he's like he is. Pastor Valan, do you need the mic?
The Bible says that there's safety in a multitude of counselors. So then I must have people around me that love me and that I trust, that will show me. Then I have to have enough humility to listen. Because it's been my experience, God always puts your help there. All my life, it's been somebody there telling me what I just didn't hear.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I agree that, I don't know that it's virtually impossible, but I believe you do need to try to see yourself. I believe you need to try to see yourself. Otherwise, and that's why you have a multitude of counselors, okay? You have counselors there to help you to see yourself. And then when you see yourself, have enough humility to humble yourself to try to do something different. So I do believe if you're not open to seeing yourself, you won't. You will not. So I do believe you need to try at least to be open to, I do that sometimes. That, you're right about that.
One of the hindrances and one of the things that's hard to do is you have to find somebody that's not afraid for you to grow. You have so many people that's around you that their main goal is to keep you. Thank you. Appreciate you. So, one of their main goals is to keep you down or either keep you where they are. You have to have somebody around you who is not intimidated by your growth. And that's hard to find. It's hard to find, Gene, somebody that doesn't mind you going on past them. And I think that's been a big hindrance in the churches because the pastor, one of his main objects was to make sure that he dominated you. And that if he saw you, seemed like you were getting a little past him and everything, he shut you down.
And then,
you used to have a Sunday school class.
and not to be, and someone that's not intimidated to tell you about you. And that's what we do a lot of times. We surround ourselves with people that they go right along with us and not helping us one bit. not helping us one bit. But you got to have somebody around you that's courage enough to say, you acting a flat-foot fool right now. You know, and that way, to me that's a real friend. To me, that's a real friend.
And lady, that's why you can't keep people around you that need you. You know, a lot of people today keep people around who need what they give you. And as long as you need what I'm giving you, you gonna watch what you say. Because then you said the wrong thing, I'm gonna cut you out.
That's true, Pastor. That's so true. So then it was foolish of Saul to think that he could disobey God. And, a lot of people think that. They think that you can do wrong and get by. But old deacon in the church that I came from, who was actually Brother Wade, such a grandfather, right? Brother Wade's grandfather said, you can't do wrong and get by. You can't do wrong and get by. Now, you may get away with it for a little while, but you can't get by. And then if you get by with me, you can't get by with God. Because God sits in an all-seeing place. And he knows everything. So you cannot get by with it with God. And it was just foolish of him to think that he could disobey God and get away with it. His disobedience, as we found out, brought with it a harsh judgment. It brought with him the announcement that he would no longer have the kingdom, that it would be taken away from him. Now, we're going to see he's going to continue on, but there's not going to be a dynasty coming from the tribe of Benjamin. That's going to go to David, and the dynasty that's going to come from the tribe of Judah, that's going to eventually end up with Jesus Christ being the king. And so now we go to chapter 14. And so if you would just turn on over to chapter 14. And this chapter is going to focus on Jonathan. It's going to focus on Jonathan. And we need to take a look at Jonathan because we need to see the relationship that's established between Jonathan and Saul. You're going to find out when we look at this that Saul is just kind of jealous. Saul did not want anybody to get any more respect. He didn't want anybody to get any more accolades than he got. Even if it came from his own son. He was jealous. He was jealous. And then if anybody showed anybody a little more attention than they showed him, then that messed him up. That really messed him up. And so we need to take a look at that, to look at Jonathan as a courageous soldier, because he is in fact pictured here as a courageous soldier. He is also pictured here as a man of faith. And we see them in contrast. We see Jonathan as being courageous and a man of faith. Well, we see Saul still acting in unbelief. But he's the king. But he's still acting in unbelief. And so when we look at chapter 14, it starts out by telling us that back over in chapter 13 and 23, the very last verse, it says, and the garrison of the Philistines went out to the passage of Michmash. And so the Philistines had sent some soldiers to guard that pass. They were trying to keep Israel out. Keep Israel out and guard that path. And so when Jonathan saw this as an opportunity to attack and see the Lord work, while Saul was still hesitating in unbelief. Look at chapter 14 and verse 1. Now it came to pass upon a day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said unto the young man that bare his armor, come and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side. But he told not his father. So that's key. You have to remember that he didn't tell his father what he was getting ready to do. So he had a plan. And the plan that he had was, we're going to go over and we're going to see if the Lord be with us. And Saul tarried. See verse 2? Saul tarried. Now you're the king, but you tarrying. You got all of these people that's under you, that's looking to you, that place you there, said, we want a king. They put you there because they believed in you. But Saul tarried in the uttermost part of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in Migron, and the people that were with him were about 600. So now, he's hesitating, but Jonathan is taking action. So Jonathan had a plan that he did not reveal to Saul, and it was simply this. He and his armor bearer would deliberately go over to the garrison where the Philistines, go over to the path at Michmash where the Philistines were, and allow them to see them. And you know, you got to be courageous. So you're going into the enemy's territory, and you just have one other person with you, and that one other person is your armor bearer. So you tell him, come on, let's go over, we'll cross over, and we'll let them see us. And so in verse 9, he says, chapter 14, verse 9, if they say to us, and I'm going to read this from the New Living Translation. It says, if they say to us, stay where you are, or we'll kill you, then we'll stop and not go up to them. Then in verse 10 it says, but if they say, come on up and fight, then we will go up. That will be the Lord's sign that he will help us defeat them. And so what we're going to see is that the Philistines did not see the two of them. I mean, they let themselves be deliberately seen. If you just got two little measly Israelites, the Philistines didn't see them as a threat. But Jonathan was courageous, and Jonathan was a man of faith. And so when they went up, he says, you just come on up behind me. He told his armor bearer, you come on up behind me, for the Lord will help us defeat him. Because in verse 11, excuse me, it says, and both of them discovered themselves, or they let themselves be seen, unto the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they had hid themselves. See, they were filling themselves. They were feeling this, but you know, when you just got two people and they got a whole army of people. How many of you know if you got the Lord on your side, that with just two people, you got more, you can do more with two people than they can do with the thousands that they had. And that's what happened. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us, and we will show you a thing. And that was a sign that Jonathan needed, that the Lord was with them. And Jonathan said unto his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them into the hand of Israel. And so they climbed up, and suddenly Jonathan and his armor bearer, they went in and they killed about 20 people, just the two of them. And when they killed just the two of them, terror and confusion broke out in the camp, because now they wasn't expecting that. What is that? The element of surprise. The element of surprise. They were not expecting that. And so when they killed those two, panic broke out in the camp, and they just started, sometimes, when that usually happened, they started killing each other. But not only that, God saw to it that an earthquake came. Struck everybody, and everybody was terrified. And so this prepared the way for Israel to have a great victory. But now, in the meantime, where is the king? Where is the king? We're looking for the king. We're looking for the one that looked like a king. And so go to verse 16. Chapter 14, verse 16. And so the watchmen of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away. Now, the multitude they're talking about is the multitude of Philistines. So they see from where they are, they can see that there is some panic in the camp. They can see there's some trouble going on. There's some rumbling going on, and something is happening. And the Philistine army, they're leaving here. They're melting away. And so now they're getting their courage up. They're getting their courage up. So they watched, and they could see that they were retreating, that the Philistine army was retreating. Then Saul said unto the people that were with him, number now. and see who is gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. Okay, all right. So now you can see Saul's mind is going, now what is he doing out? Am I telling him to go out there? And it took the armor bearer with him. Okay, so you already see, you can kind of see the setup that's getting ready to happen. And Saul said unto Ahiah, bring hither the ark of God. Now what you getting the ark of God for? See, he's using it again like it's a good luck charm. Go get the ark of God. For the ark of God was at that time with the children of Israel. And it came to pass, while Saul talked unto the priests, that the noise that was in the host of the Philistines went on and increased. It just got louder and louder. And Saul said unto the priest, withdraw thy hand. So now, he called for the ark. Then he said, never mind. Just let it stay where it is. And Saul and all the people that were with him assembled themselves, and they came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a very great discomfiture. Moreover, the Hebrews that were with the Philistines before that time, which went up from them, the ones who had deserted the army, the ones who had left because they were scared, they came back. Which went up with them unto the camp from the country round about, even they also turned to be with the Israelites that were with Saul and Jonathan, because everybody loves a winner, don't they? But when you lose alone. Isn't that right? That's not in the Bible, but it's just the truth. Likewise, all the men of Israel which had hid themselves in Mount Ephraim, when they heard that the Philistines fled, even they also followed hard after them in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over unto Beth-haven. So the Lord saved Israel. So the Lord saved Israel. It wasn't Jonathan, it wasn't Saul, it was the Lord. But now the Lord honored Jonathan's bravery. He honored Jonathan being courageous. He honored Jonathan's faith. But in the big scheme of things, it was the Lord who won the battle. And so Saul, now we take a look at Saul in verse 24. It says, and the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening. Okay, so they're fighting. But now you issue out. You got soldiers, or let's just talk about us. So I don't know anything about being a soldier other than what I read. But I know I work better after I've had a good meal. How many of y'all work better once you're fed and you got I can't think, honest to God, I can't think. If I'm hungry, I cannot think. So I had to have something to nourish him. Now, Saul, this just show you how foolish his thinking was. He wouldn't let the soldiers eat. Soldiers. Now, if you're fighting and you're fighting for your life, you need all the strength you can get. And so he adjured the people that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies. Not that the Lord may be glorified, but that I may be avenged of mine enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. They're going around hungry. They're thirsty. And when you're hungry, when you're really, really hungry, you're delirious. Okay, I'm just talking about me. I'm delirious. When I'm really, really hungry, I'm delirious. When I'm really, really hungry, I'm delirious when I'm really, really sleep deprived. So that's what was going on here, and he's going to make just a foolish vow that's going to come back to hunt him here. And so he says, cursed be any man. In other words, and I'm going to kill you. If you eat, you got to die. If you eat, you got to die. And so the people were coming to the wood. Behold, the honey dropped. They saw honey, And you know, when you're hungry, everything look good. Everything look good. But no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people did what? They feared the oath. In verse 26, they feared the oath. But now Jonathan is not with them. So Jonathan didn't hear when he made that stupid oath. Jonathan didn't hear that. So verse 27 says, and I'm going to read this from the not New King James, but the New Living Translation. It says, but Jonathan had not heard his father's command, and he dipped the end of his stick into a piece of honeycomb and ate the honey. After he had eaten it, he felt what? Refreshed. But one of the men saw him and said, your father made the army take a strict oath that anyone who eats food today will be cursed. That is why everyone is weary and faint. And in verse 29, this is what Jonathan says. My father has made trouble for us all. My father has made trouble for us all. A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I have eaten this little bit of honey? If the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food they found among our enemies, think how many more Philistines we could have killed. If we just had a little food, if y'all had a little food, y'all could have done a lot more damage than you did. They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Ajalon, growing more and more faint. And so now, look at what his command has going to cause. So now, if you were the commander and you had any sense at all, you wouldn't deprive your troops of food and energy. You get the energy from the food. When they're out fighting the enemy. And so it had created, when we get to the men now, we see that his... And here, like I just said, when you are hungry, everything looks good. So, by him telling them that they couldn't eat, it created in them an abnormal craving for food. You know, just the first thing I get, that's what I'm eating. But here's the deal. You know, God had laws. And so because of the foolish oath or vow that he had made, it caused them to break God's law. So now look at verse 31. Again, I think I just read that. Verse 31, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. So they chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Ajalon, growing more and more faint. Verse 32, that evening they rushed from the battle plunder and butchered the sheep, goats, cattle, and calves, but they ate them without draining the blood. And so we already know that that's a law that they've broken, right? Because if we go back over to Leviticus, like the 3rd chapter, and you know this because we've read that and we've studied that, Leviticus 3 and 17, it says, it shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings that ye eat neither fat nor blood. In Leviticus chapter 7 and verse 26, 7 and 26, it says, moreover, ye shall eat no manner of blood, whether it be of fowl or of beast, in any of your dwellings. Because he says, I have given you the blood. The life is in the blood. Now, I'm the master of the life. The life is in the blood. Don't eat it. Drain the blood. So they had certain ways that they had to do that. Well, Saul, you got the men starving to death. If I saw a roach and I was hungry, if I was hungry enough, I'd eat it. You know what I'm telling you? I'm trying to tell you. Don't they? People eat grasshoppers and things, don't they? Don't they? You get hungry enough, you'll eat whatever. Come on now. When you get hungry enough, it'll look like a piece of chicken. I'm trying to tell you. And so you got the people around here starving. They're hungry. The first chance they got, they just killed those animals, and they didn't even think about draining the blood. They just ate it. They just ate it, broke the commandments. And so Saul, again, when we look at it over in, let's go to chapter 14 and look at verse 33. Someone reported to Saul, look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that still has blood in it. And here's Saul. That's very wrong. So now he's getting all, he's getting his wits about him and trying to, act like a king and everything. That's it. Find a large stone and roll it over here. Then go out among the troops and tell them, bring the cattle and sheep and goats here to me. Kill them here and drain the blood before you eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with the blood still in it. So that night, all the troops brought the animals and slaughtered them there. Then Saul built an altar. Now, Saul has been king. Saul has been king. Now, as a king, you're supposed to have some kind of spiritual life. You're supposed to have some kind of spiritual life. You're supposed to be dependent on the Lord. This is the first time he's built an altar since he's been king. The first time he's built an altar since he's been king. So he's not taking the blame for any of this. Do you see that? He's not taking the blame for anything that he's done. He never should have made that foolish commandment. And so it was his commandment that provoked the people to sin. And so he tried to make it right by offering proper sacrifices to the Lord. But, it just probably, again, shows, since this was the first altar that he had built, that he wasn't very interested in anything spiritual. Not very interested in anything spiritual. And so he didn't build the altar to worship God. Did it say anything about him worshiping God? Well, he built the altar to try to make it right. He built it because the men had sinned. Not to worship God. And so still, Saul was, as you can see, we're going through this, you can see how he would put the blame on everybody else instead of taking the blame himself, instead of fessing up. Again, that's hard to do. It's hard to see yourself. Yes.
I just see Satan at work at this.
Uh-huh.
I just see Satan at work at this, and I believe that Satan wants to he wants you to go up under leadership that will withhold the very thing that you need. And you're satisfied because you say, I'm up under leadership. But if you're not getting what you need from it, you might as well not even be up under any. You might as well. And that's the reason I said that if I'm not in a situation like what I'm in now, and the thing about it, some people you can't help anyway. Some people they ain't gonna do nothing no way. But you have some folk, like myself, who was like those folks that needed something to eat, who was actually starving. I would have stayed up under my pastor the rest of my life. I promise you I didn't have to be no pastor. I loved him. I would have stayed there. Couldn't nobody made me leave or move or nothing if I had been getting what I needed, And but I think that's the purpose of Satan, is to keep you away from what you need. It is. And, one of the things I desire most now at this point in my life is to have some Jonathan. I want to have some Joshua, to have some minister that I could pour into what God has given me. But they running from me. Yeah. And I know that's not them. I know that's Satan.
Anybody else? Thank you, Pastor Bland. And so now Saul wants to finish the battle with the Philistines. So here, when we go to verse 36, an army doesn't usually fight at night, so Saul's attack would surprise the Philistines. They would not be ready to fight, so Saul thought he could win. So here's what he does. He says, let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. Let's destroy every one of them. And the men just said, well, you're the king. Do whatever you think is the right thing to do. So Saul asked God, but no, the priest says to him, somebody, thank God for somebody with some sense. Don't you think you need to ask God first? Instead of you just going on out on your own? In verse 36, Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and spoil them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatsoever seemeth good unto thee. Then said the priest, let us draw near hither unto God. Let's see what God says about it before we just go all off, helter-skelter. And Saul asked counsel of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them unto the man of Israel? Unto the hand of Israel? Thank you, honey. But he answered him not that day. But who answered him not that day? The Lord. What? Saul, come on, brother. And so, you don't get an answer, that probably means you need to just, cool your jets. You need to stay where you are. And so then Saul said to the leaders, something's wrong. Because it's okay, so he's going to make it right. He's just bullheaded. So he's going to make it right. And so Saul says here, something's not right. I've got to figure out what's wrong. And why is the Lord not answering? And so he said, I want all of my army commanders to come here. We got to find out what sin was committed here today. And then he goes on in verse 39, says, for as the Lord liveth, which saveth Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. I'm going to read it to you from the New Living Translation. Verse 39 says, I vow by the name of the Lord who rescued Israel that the sinner will surely die, even if it is my own son Jonathan. But no one would tell him what the trouble was. See, everybody else knew that Jonathan had eaten that honey. Okay? But now Saul didn't know. But he's so cocky, he's just flipped. You know how sometimes you can just say something before you think about it? Just flip. Just flip. And so not knowing that that's going to come back to haunt him. But, at this point, I don't know that he really even cared. Because he just wanted to be seen in a good light. And so he says, even if it's my son Jonathan. And so we go all the way through this. They go and they cast lots to see where the guilt is. They cast lots, and the lots fall on Saul and Jonathan. And then they cast lots again, and the lot falls to Jonathan. And Saul asked him, what have you done? What is the thing that you have done? And Jonathan says, well, I ate the honey. I tasted a little bit of honey. Look at 43. Look at verse 43. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what thou hast done. And Jonathan told him and said, I did but taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in mine hand, and lo, I must die. And Saul answered, God do so, and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. Remorseful? Does he sound remorseful? Not really. Not to me. He does not. And so...
Lady Deborah said this, and I just see it so plainly. It's nothing but Satan. Is that when you have a leader in that way, you are expendable. You are expendable because all he wants to do is have his way. And so you fall, you and your wife get divorced, you go back out, and he don't matter, long as he can keep his program going.
And so, so he says, well, you got to die. That's kind of the way he looked at it. Well, Jonathan, I made the oath, and so you got to die. You gonna have to die. But the people, thank God for the people. The people stood up for him. People said, no, Saul, you are out of your mind. If it hadn't been for Jonathan, we wouldn't be where we are now.
I just, it just makes me think about, in the low part of my life and in my ministry, that a woman, you were there too, that a woman that was on her deathbed, we had to put on masks and to go in there and see her She probably died the next day or day, but whatever. That woman looked up at me and told me, she said, Elder Bland, she said, God got great things for you. She said, your pastor jealous of you. Jesus.
And so in verse 45, I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. But the people broke in and said to Saul, Jonathan has won this great victory for Israel. Should he die? Then they said, far from it. In other words, they're saying over our dead body. You're not going to do anything to Jonathan. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair on his head will be touched. For God helped him do a great deed today. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. And so as Pastor Bland has said, you all can come on in, come on in, come on in. And so as the people has said, and I'm getting ready to close, that's my cue, thank God that he has somebody. Thank God he has somebody. And he has somebody watching out for you. You know, everybody's not, you know, we want to think everybody is of the devil, and we want to think everybody is against us, but God got somebody against you. You just got to find them. You know what I'm saying? And so you don't need everybody on your side. You just need the right person on your side. And you just wait until God places them in your path. You stop going out trying to figure it out and trying to make it work and trying to make it happen. That's what happened to Saul. That was his whole problem. But God got somebody for you that's going to watch out for you. Give the Lord a hand praise, everybody.